Hey there, everybody. I am Steve Taylor, your host. Welcome to another installment of MSP Webinars. I'm excited about today. Today, I'm joined by Anthony from Auvik. Anthony, thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us. We're excited.
Excellent. So, Anthony, something that I noticed recently, and it's kind of sad because I've been seeing the Auvik logo for well over a year now. The Auvik logo, that looks like an igloo in the top there.
Yeah, it actually is. It's kind of funny. The first kind of icebreaker that everybody has with Auvik, because we're fairly new to the scene. We officially started up 7 years ago, and today is actually our birthday. Funny enough, so they have everybody wearing their Auvik purple. Yeah, so there you go. But it actually is kind of funny. It is an igloo at the top of our logo there, and a little backstory. Auvik is actually a native Inuit for a building block of an igloo. So with networks kind of being the building block of IT, we kind of thought it was fitting just to kind of have a little bit of wordplay to play to kind of the Canadiana about us and also our day-to-day.
Very, very cool. I like that.
Yeah.
So now you guys are, okay, so you guys are a network monitoring and management tool is what you guys consider yourselves. But you integrate with RMM tools as well as PSAs.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So, I know you've got a slide deck for us that you're going to go through, and you're going to give us a demo, excuse me, of how Auvik works. But I know that one of the questions I'm going to have for you, and we can wait until this is all done, that's okay, is, why do I need Auvik when, my RMM tool is able to look at all the network equipment? You look at a tool like LabTech or Kaseya, I'm sorry, ConnectWise Automate or Kaseya. I feel like those are some pretty powerful RMM tools, and they can kind of do everything I need them to do, right?
For sure. Oh, by all means. Like when it comes to Auvik, we always say the vast majority of our partners already have an existing RMM because they already need to be monitoring the client sites in some way, shape, or form. So whether it's, like you said, LabTech or Kaseya, SolarWinds, there's a whole Rolodex of RMMs out there. The one area where we've kind of found niche in the market is they're primarily focused around, the endpoints, the, PCs, servers, workstations, phones. Where we kind of come into the mix is on the network infrastructure. So, when it comes to the billing model and everything, I like to kind of touch upon that. I've saved that for the end just to kind of bring everything full circle. But our main priority is firewalls, managed switches, and routers. Everything else is virtually managed for free when it comes to Auvik.
Okay, cool. Well, like I said, I know you've got a slide deck you're going to take us through. Why don't you go through that? Because I've always been a little interested in what Auvik has to offer as well.
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to Auvik, again, to just build off your question here, Steve, we're giving you a more holistic approach when it comes to the network environment. So like you mentioned, certain RMMs we have integrations with, like Continuum, like ConnectWise, and we have great working relationships with a vast majority of our partners. So when it comes down to who we are, like I said, we are a Canadian-based company, although we did recently just open up an office in the UK, little town called Milton Keynes. And we also have another Ontario office located in our nation's capital of Ottawa. So kind of, future plans is obviously world domination, but we're going to continue to try and be able to service a presence as we continue to, go into additional markets. We are 100% channel focused when it comes to our service offering. So that's why we do have such great relationships with our MSP partners, because we only sell to MSPs. So at the end of the day, you can even deal register your leads to make sure that that they are being taken care of under your umbrella when it comes to even evaluating Auvik or whether you're a partner of Auvik. But the main thing at the end of the day is that overall infrastructure monitoring of your network in its entirety. So, no more missing switch closets, no more tracing cables around the client sites looking for hidden switches in ceiling tiles or underneath people's desks. We heard all awesome kinds of stories with things like that. We're here to just kind of be that extra set of eyes and ears monitoring that network in a more proactive standpoint. And one of the cool things that we've done over the past year or so, we actually released our own podcast that we produce. So we have a great group of hosts that manage that podcast. And we often have, people in the space who, really bring a lot of value to the table when it comes to that podcast, which is available pretty much on every single, podcast source available. So feel free to check it out. Frankly, MSP, it's a great resource there. So to kind of bring it over to my next slide is with Auvik, we're really trying to get MSPs away from that break fix mentality of just kind of being, asked to drop on a dime to service your clients. We want to get them on a managed recurring revenue cycle of being that managed service offered provider from your MSP. Now, with that being said, there's other tools in the space. You could have an RMM, you could have a PSA, you could have, certain tools that you need to use for some compliances. So we, have clients and partners of all shapes and sizes, whether it's, a specific compliancy, like I said, you may have, clients that have maybe a sufficiently large network. I usually find that over 15 endpoints is when, more and more of our partners are starting to look to have Auvik to help manage that kind of environment. Or there may also just be some overall complexities of the network. You may have multiple vendors where there may be Cisco or HP, Fortinet, SonicWall, you name it. And you just need to be able to be that trusted IT advisor. Now, kind of building off of that whole Auvik Canadian mantra, I usually make the joke that it's just us being Canadian. We like to play nicely with all of our vendors. But there's not too many devices we haven't come across before. So we do have a very good Rolodex of devices that we support in our day-to-day. I think as of right now, we're at around, 7,000 different vendors and 15,000 different devices. So just know we've got you covered when it comes to some of the complexities of the vendors that you may be dealing with. And even if it's things like environments that have multiple VLANs or, remote locations, we're able to cover all the bases there, as well as provide, the services for, businesses where an outage could be detrimental to their day-to-day. So the cost of downtime is relatively high for them. Making sure that, we're alerting the MSP and letting when a device could be going down or when things like a spanning tree change may be happening, just to name a few alerts. You're definitely going to be kept in the know there. So if any of those kind of listed here in this option one kind of resonate with you, then obviously there is a fit, but it also comes down to supporting your clients as well. So if you're sifting through tickets and you find that you're just getting inundated with going through the weeds of what exactly is going on in the environment, we have integrations with PSAs as well to tie into, or we'll generate a webhook or send you a notification through something like Microsoft Teams or Slack, or even just through an email notification. And now a lot of our partners are looking at Auvik, for that ongoing monitoring and management piece. But one new initiative that we're really pushing and finding a lot of success with is providing that initial network assessment to try and win new business as well. So I like to kind of cover that aspect in our demo today. So that's pretty much the intro of Auvik that I had set here. Now I wanted to kind of open things up to go into that demo environment where we can kind of have a high level overview of everything Auvik, and then kind of go into the technical aspects as we drill down into these device details and the overall functionality of Auvik as a whole, if that sounds good with you, Steve.
That sounds great. Please.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to go ahead and slide on over here. Now, can you still see my screen okay here, Steve?
I can. I'm seeing the
okay.
The presentation still.
Okay, so stop share. Let's go over and share the map. Okay, so now what we should be looking at is the Auvik portal. Does everything look good here?
That looks really neat.
The one feedback that I often get when we're looking at this page in Auvik is the UI. Everything is nice and neatly laid out for us here. There's no real, heavy lifting when it comes to Auvik, and that's why we're centralized in the MSP space. So a lot of our partners have clients that are in that SMB environment where, like I said, you may be dealing with multiple clients and you're trying to get it all underneath that one umbrella mentality. So this is essentially that single pane glass view of everything when it comes to your client sites. Now, the nice thing from this view is we'll actually be able to populate your client sites on a geographic map. So you can see here, our Ottawa office lab environment has some critical and warning and informational alerts that are currently being triggered, at this point in time. And if I wanted to look at a list view, whether you're managing 10, 20, 100 clients, however many it may be, they'll be nice and neat within this MSP dashboard here, where you can simply click on a name and dive into that unique network. Now, what you may also notice on this left toolbar is there's a lot of high-level management that we can do at this phase. So the main thing when it comes to Auvik is scalability. So whether it's 5 clients, 10 clients, 20 clients, like I said, you want to be able to jump in and out, with a simple click. And from a management process, I know we kind of touched upon the alerting before we jumped into the portal here, but the main thing here is if you're setting your alerts from this top level view, no longer do you have to go in and edit the alert pertaining to each particular client. You can manage it from this top level view. So even if it's something like a VPN being lost, or like I said, that spanning tree change alert. The reason why I always like drilling down on this alert in particular is I can't tell you how many times I've had deployment calls or trial reviews where one of our partners has come to us and said, Anthony, we had a spanning tree change issue and we happen to have Auvik running at that client in particular. And the great thing about that is we were actually able to see the direct loop back happening on the designated switch. So now, as opposed to having to roll out a truck, trace cables manually around that client site, all we had to do was pick up the phone, talk to their internal IT or talk to their office manager, and just have them simply go unplug that patch cable that may be causing the issue. And within minutes, they're back up and running and ready to go. So these are some of the alerts that are just ready to go out of the box for you. So that way you don't need to worry about any manual configuration. These are all built based off of industry standards and best practices. But don't feel that you're handcuffed to what we've built prior to getting everything up and running. You can see here there's a category here where you can customize these alerts, so you can set specific thresholds if needed, or you can even go ahead and add in any specific alerts that you're looking to get that maybe weren't readily available out of the box. We want to make sure we're built to tailor to fit to your business needs as well. And on that note, we also have notification channels. So like I said, whether it's something like Slack or Microsoft Teams, or whether you want to build it into your PSA, we have several streams that you can leverage to be notified about these alerts that are being triggered at this point in time.
So if you click on add notification channel, that'll show us all the options that are available, right?
Correct. But because my management team doesn't want me going in and adding in multiple notification channels personally, I am a little bit handcuffed with what I can show personally. But once you're in and doing that discovery and, like I said, tailoring everything to fit, that's when you're going to be able to get creative with, who's being notified and where. And, for example, if I wanted to, maybe have a little bit more tailored fit, like let's say I'm using something like ConnectWise Manage here, from this integration, if I go into the Manage Alerts tab, you can even set up something like a status mapping. The same thing goes for any Autotask user who may also be using that platform for their PSA, which has now been acquired by Datto. So a lot of acquisitions happening in the space, but we like to play well with as many platforms as we can. So here you can even add in status mappings and even set up notification channels within that integration to make sure that the right people are being notified about the right alerts. And so on that notion, when it comes to, involving the right people in your Auvik instance, you can also manage your users across all clients. So the one thing I like to say about this is whether you have, a certain amount of text that need to be given, user credentials to get into the Auvik portal, you can give them something like a level 1 or level 2 tech access, which are already pre-built out of the box for you. you can go in and add your own custom roles as well. Or if you want to kind of differentiate yourself from the crowd and maybe have a more kind of open book mentality when it comes to what you're managing of the client networks, you can even give your end users guest access. So that way, it's a great way to make them feel like they're a part of your team. And it's also, when it comes to the networking aspect of the day-to-day, it's something that may be overly foreign to them in some cases. So from a value added perspective of MSP who's using Auvik versus MSP who's not, you can now say, hey, I can show you every nook and cranny of your environment to help better your understanding. And then that way, when you're making the recommendations for, maybe a new hardware migration or a firmware upgrade, you can now bring them into your world and show them, hey, this is why we're recommending, this particular upgrade. And one of the features that a lot of our partners really like, which is a little bit of a cherry on top here, you can actually white label Auvik. So if you want to tailor this all to your MSP branding, you can add in your own custom logos, your own color schemes. And even if you wanted to, have this tailored to fit across, the client side of things, you can go into that unique client portal and then rebrand it to, their custom logo and color schemes. So that way it looks like you built them their own custom client portal. It's a nice, kind of feather in your cap when it comes to the client relations aspect.
So you're saying not only can I change this so it has my MSP's logo where the Auvik logo is, I can change most of the colors, it looks like, throughout the portal, but I can also make individual client portals that are customized with maybe their information.
Exactly. And a lot of our partners like to leverage this, again, just as a way to kind of stand out from the crowd, because there's a lot of RMMs and, in the space, and, like I said, ConnectWise, SolarWinds, Continuums. The reason why we have, so many partners that are using, these RMMs already and also looking at Auvik is, it's a great way to try and, punch above your weight class and maybe, gain that new client that may be a little bit bigger than you're used to. So it really does help you in the long run when it comes to building that relationship. And then now when you're bringing them into this aspect of their network, you're not only their trusted IT advisor, but they also see you as a value added partner, right? So it's a really easy way for them to level with you. And we also offer that 2-factor authentication as well. So if you wanted to go in and, make sure that it's a little bit more secure, by all means, we can tie into, either something like Auth Anvil or a Windows login or something along those lines.
I was going to ask, will that work with Google Authenticator or something similar to it?
Exactly. So I use mine through Google Auth.
And then what about the people that are using, oh gosh, why did it escape me? There's that MSP-centric 2-factor tool, Duo.
So we do have some integrations coming down the line with other vendors. That's one of our big things coming for 2019. So with that in mind, we do have a lot more strategic alliances that are happening. When it comes to Duo, I know I've personally met with them at shows, and we have a great working relationship with them. And from what I've been told, we can also tie in through the Duo platform, if not today, within the near future, from what I've been told.
Perfect.
So this is, again, that high-level overview of Auvik when it comes to the overall management of the client sites here, Steve. So if we're ready to dive into a unique network, I'd be happy to kind of get our hands dirty here.
I'd love that.
Awesome. So like I said, when we're looking at the client, you can either dive in from the map view or from the list view. I like the drop down here. It's a nice, neat drop down that will show all of your clients that you're managing on a day-to-day basis. And today we're going to be looking at our office lab environment. So here you can see, once this populates, it'll show us the unique network of our lab environment here today. And so the way that Auvik works, to backpedal a little bit here, it's a simple collector that you get running within that client site. So it can be done through something like a virtual appliance, a bare metal bash script installer, or a Windows service, which I find to be the most popular. So as long as you have a VM or a server or Windows PC that we can deploy to, you can pretty much get this network mapped, monitored, and documented in around 20 to 30 minutes. It's not one of those RMM tools that takes a lot of heavy lifting to get off the ground. It's literally a piece of software that's just built to work, plug and play mentality here. So once you get that service up and running, it'll take you into this discovery portal of the environment. And so this is why I say a lot of our partners are starting to use us as a network assessment tool as well, because here you can see all the IPs that we've discovered within this client site. And here you can see the protocols that we leverage in order to better map out the client's environments here. So here you can see SNMP is our primary protocol. Then we leverage login statuses as well, WMI, and VMware as well for designated hypervisors. So once everything starts snowballing and everything's starting to be detected, you'll start seeing prompts at the top of your screen. And this is almost like your Auvik to-do list. So we're already going to give you a helping hand when it comes to doing a deployment. So you can see that we have some SNMP credentials that are needed for new devices. We also need some WMI to be plugged in, as well as some extra subnet that we've picked up through our discovery process that we may want to scan to, again, get that more holistic when it comes to the client environment. Now, the nice thing about the map, a lot of our partners, we find they're using something today, but it's a little bit of a manual process. So they may be, manually tracing these cables and wires and then documenting them in something like Visio, just so that way they have, some sort of documented backbone that they can kind of rely on. Now, the nice thing with Auvik is you can export these maps as a PDF or as a vector graph if you want to import it into Visio. Some of our partners do that as well. But for the most part, the nice thing about Auvik is it's not static. So if I wanted to filter the map, we can have quick filters pre-programmed in to see something like network elements only here. So that way I can focus on just my core infrastructure here and not worry about the endpoints that may be associated. Or I can even, set custom filters, like if I wanted to search by a device name or device type in particular, like Cisco or HP, SonicWall, to name a few. By all means, we can look up those as well. Or even if you wanted to, like I said, traverse across VLANs, I can add in queries as I see fit, and I can even stack queries. So if I wanted to see my VLAN 40 and my VLAN 70 here, for example, you can now see that the map is illuminating to show those specific VLANs. And if I hit apply as a filter here, and I zoom in a little bit, I can now see the overall connections across and any trunking that's happening within the environment by just hovering over any cable or also hovering over any device details, just to kind of get that high level overview when it comes to this client site.
This is actually really intense. This is a lot more than my RMM is able to do, even just looking at the visual aspect.
And that's some of the feedback that we're used to hearing here, Steve. And like I said, we're not here to step on any toes when it comes to RMMs. We're vendor agnostic, like I said. So whether you're using something like ConnectWise or SolarWinds, Continuum, Autotask, Datto RMM, we work with MSPs of all shapes and sizes. So with that being said, this is just, again, that more holistic view, being able to see and something tangible when it comes to your client site. So, whether you're a networking engineer or whether you're just somebody like myself who's on a sales and marketing side of things, all I can do is look at my devices, look at my cabling here, and now I can see the exact connectivity across all these devices. So now there's no needing to go through the network with a fine-tooth comb. You can see exactly by hovering over this cable that GigE1 on that SG300 is plugged into the inside interface on our ASA here. And the cool thing too is this is all being reported in real time based off the last 10 minutes. If I wanted to revert back to the last month, for example, what we should start seeing happening is alerts should begin populating on our devices here. And you can actually see, if I narrow in here, the interfaces themselves are actually built to reflect the alert being triggered at that point in time. So little backstory on what happened here in our environment. We were lucky enough to have a broadcast storm in our lab environment a couple of weeks back. And the funny thing being, with us being a network monitoring solution, we were actually able to pinpoint exactly where the issues were happening and able to drill down on the specific alert that was being triggered on that interface. So now if I wanted to see this specific alert, obviously if you have a PSA integration, it'd be sent out there. You'd be notified by email. But here in a quick drop-down view, I can see it was a high broadcast traffic alert and it was over 98% of traffic was in broadcast on this device. And you can actually even see the external ticket ID here that we've tied into ConnectWise Manage. So the main thing here, Steve, is we want all of our partners to always feel like they're in the know and be able to proactively monitor their client sites. So again, server, workstation, phone, printer monitoring, again, the traditional RMM will do a fantastic job with doing the patch management and remote desktop on those devices. Where Auvik really adds value is by being able to drill down on a specific device. If I click here on my ASA, this is essentially the device profile page, I like to call, when it comes to this specific device in particular. So here you can see the make and model, the current software that's running, the serial number and the firmware, and again, the uptime and online statuses. And if I scroll down a little bit further, go ahead.
So now all of that stuff, if you scroll back up, all of this stuff, I know my RMM tool can get. The device details
Correct.
and all of that stuff there. The bandwidth and interfaces by utilization and that type of stuff. I mean, in theory, I could get that stuff by logging into the management interface of this device. And that leads to a really good point, though, that the Auvik software isn't going to do me any good unless I've got managed switches and firewalls that have all of this stuff built in. If I've got a client that's just using a bunch of Netgear dumb switches and a Netgear I can't even think of it. Here's how little I use consumer grade stuff of anything other than WRT54G. Okay, so
Sure.
Nighthawk. So if somebody has one of those Linksys or Netgear or whatever brand it is, Nighthawk routers, this isn't going to do us good, right?
Right. There needs to be some level of management that we need to leverage in order to make this all happen, right? So if there's no management functionality, if we can't enable SNMP at the bare minimum, it's not a good fit when it comes to the device details that we can pull, because frankly, there's no management that we can leverage. So with that in mind, I would say it's not Auvik's fault, but it is kind of our burden to bear. However, we are intuitive.
It's your limitation.
To know exactly. However, when it comes to these unmanaged switches, let's say they are using a managed router or firewall. If they use something like an unmanaged switch, typically what Auvik will show is something like this cloud instance, where we know that there's other devices downstream from this firewall or router. It's just we don't know exactly how to indicate how they're connected. So it's essentially going to show something like an inferred interface or an inferred connection, because we can still ping and show the IPs downstream. It's just there's no way for us to monitor the medium that's connecting them. Does that make sense there?
I think it does, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So when it comes to the management aspect of the uptime and whatnot, of course, you can get this within your traditional, RMM by being able to remote into the device. The main thing is with Auvik, that's just not something that we find to be overly scalable when you have multiple environments, multiple devices that you need to, keep these remote sessions going into. So you'll notice here in the top right corner, there's actually this terminal option or the remote browser function if the device should leverage a GUI or something like that, where it'll actually proxy us to that landing page for that specific device. Now, if I click terminal here, this is essentially going to be a blind login into this device. So if I type in my Auvik password here and hit connect, it'll then allow me to access this device through an SSH connection once this loads up. So now, instead of having to go in through that secured shell or that remote IP, everything is now streamlined into one unique dashboard.
I like that. That's pretty cool.
And so, like you said, when it came to the bandwidth, you can obviously get the readings, from the CLI on the device. But the nice thing with Auvik is we're able to put it into a nice graph, so that way you can actually see and demonstrate where the spikes are happening. You can also go into something like the troubleshooting view here, should you want to see any alerts that are being triggered given any point in time. So you can see, for example, the entity of the X1 on the Sonic wall, it looks like we were losing internet connection at one point in time on that device. So again, it's just giving you that extra set of eyes and that deep dive when it comes to this device details. Now, one thing you may also notice here is to the left, there's a top interfaces by utilization chart that's populated both, over time, based on the last month criteria that I have listed here, or if I wanted to revert back and see more real-time analysis, you can see this is now given off of a 2-minute interval. So if I wanted to take a deep dive and say, I wonder what's going on my outside interface on this ASA, I can click on this, and now we can take it one step further. Instead of looking at just the device KPIs, looking all the way down to the interface KPIs on that ASA. So now we can take it all the way down to the port level when it comes to getting these readings.
I like that. Now, with this tool, all right, let's say we're looking, do you have a managed switch in here that
Yes, sir.
we can look at?
So let's pick on this HP device, just so I get off the Cisco trainer. Let's look at this Dell Power Connect.
All right, so Dell Power Connect 48 port gigabit Ethernet switch. All right, so is this going to show me all 48 ports, whether they're up or down, or?
So if I go under inventory here, I can see all interfaces that are currently on this specific Dell Power Connect. And so here you can see all the interfaces and any connections that are physically wired into another device here. But you can see all the negotiated speeds and all the MAC addresses as well across this specific Power Connect.
And am I able to filter this anyway?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you want to look at specifically up interfaces, you want to look at all up interfaces. Now we can see all the administrative statuses, or even if I wanted to go by MAC, I can look up specific MAC addresses like 5C and see all the results here.
Okay.
And you can also export this list as well. Virtually almost all dashboards seen in Auvik have an export functionality where it'll be put into a nice, neat Excel file for you to then kind of go over in that audit mentality.
Now, here's where I might be. Here's where I might be just wishing and hoping. Am I able to, like, between Auvik and my RMM, am I able to see, like, okay, workstation 7 is actually plugged into this switch in port 35?
Yep. So when it comes to the connected to area, to give you an example here, I can see that this particular Dell Power Connect is also plugged into this SG300. So you can essentially go through and look through this connected to list and see, what other devices may be associated here. One of the other cool things that you can do, on switches in particular, is if you go under the debug, you can also look at the ARP and forwarding tables or look at the network evidence across these devices to see all the ARP evidence entries, all the forwarding tables, which is essentially going to give you a breadcrumb trail for all the MACs and interfaces that would be associated with these designated devices.
That's really nice. Especially, some of the stuff that, it's great if you're very technical and you just want to be able to point and click and just access the stuff without having to, do all of this through an SSH or whatever. But it's also helpful. Maybe you're not as technical, and this will almost kind of hold your hand as you try and figure out what's going on with your client's networks, it looks like.
Yeah. The messaging we usually push out there is that even if you're a level 1 tech, you should still be able to get a better understanding of the environment, because everything here is auto-populated through the likes of SNMP and Login and WMI and VMware. So as long as, the backbone is there when it comes to these, networking protocols, somebody like myself who has a sales and marketing background can still go in and, better understand what exactly is happening within this environment here.
Nice.
Now, the one big feature that a lot of our partners really, see value in when it comes to Auvik is our ability to automatically do configuration backups across these devices. So you can see here, I'm still looking at this Dell Power Connect, and because we have login enabled and we have CLI access on this device, whenever a backup happens here, Steve, we will automatically track it and back it up and document this automatically for you. So if I wanted to go to manage configuration and, see what changed between, this November 24th and this other November 24th date, just to kind of see, and analyze the two, I can hit compare here and select that other November 24th date. And now what you can see here is side by side, line for line, we're going to be comparing these two configs. But rather than still having to go through this with a fine tooth comb, you can either choose to scan, or if you're like me, just click this blue arrow here and it'll automatically take you to the highlight where the line items started changing. And so here you can continue to scroll, see anything that's been added or dropped between the two configs. And then that way you know exactly what changed when it came to this config. And so if for whatever reason you don't like, the recent config and you want to revert back, we also have certain options for you to be able to restore or export these configs out if you want to save them in a other secure area, or, let's say for whatever reason, this Dell Power Connect got fried in a storm or something like that. You could always export the previous running config and restore it onto a new Dell Power Connect and ship it out to that client site so they're back up and running within a few minutes.
And the only reason that restore is grayed out for you is because you just don't have the permissions to do that. It's not because
exactly.
so pretty much any device that this is able to back up, it's able to restore as well, right?
Correct. So primarily across firewall switches and routers, that's where we would be looking to leverage this type of service.
Excellent.
And so the one thing that I just wanted to show you on that note, Steve, like although we don't bill for servers, what I can do is quick filter my map to then do a quick query for all servers in my environment. And you can see here that you might be able to see little yellow hues pertaining to those devices. If I filter the map, just like I did when we were looking at those VLANs earlier, I can now see all my servers readily available in my environment here. So if I wanted to pick on my Windows server here, you can see that we both have SNMP and WMI enabled. And although we don't bill for servers, we can still show you some metrics and KPIs, just like we could, when it came to the switches. It's just we know that your endpoint RMM is already, satisfying when it comes to remote management and patch management on your servers. We just want to make sure that, again, from an alerting standpoint, we're able to monitor these devices.
But with this on servers or workstations, you're not doing patch management or anything like that.
Correct. This is just us kind of, being true to our word of giving that, like I said, total top to bottom visualization of every device within that environment. So any device with an IP, Steve, will be able to monitor it. So whether it's something like an IP phone or a camera, people's multimedia devices and whatnot, we do have, I think we have over 50 different device classifications that you can leverage in terms of making sure that everything is documented as it should be within that environment.
This is really nice, man. I like this. Now,
yeah.
No, please go ahead,
Steve. Oh, I was just going to say, when it comes to, Auvik as a whole, again, you can get fairly technical when it comes to, really diving in and seeing everything when it comes to Auvik. But, I always find the best proof of concept phases are done in a free trial state. So, we do offer free trials when it comes to Auvik. We want to make sure that we're meeting your needs, both from a business standpoint, from a technical standpoint. So we want to make sure that, we're checking off some boxes when it comes to an MSP's day-to-day. So with that in mind, it's great for me to kind of show all these devices as we're, fully deployed. But the best learning experience is when you can actually start net new with the client, perform the discovery aspect, plug away with these credentials, and see for yourself, how easy it is to get Auvik up and running. And, like I said, when it comes to everything Auvik, with that being said, we do have certain functionalities that you can leverage. And Kenny actually just brought up a good point when it comes to traffic insights. A little bit of background on that initiative. It's kind of exciting times for us here at Auvik. We actually acquired our first company, an awesome group of people out of Barcelona, Spain. Their previous company was by the name of Talea, and they do traffic monitoring, source IP, destination IP, even application monitoring. And that's something that we're set to be launching in the new year. So unfortunately, when it comes to our day-to-day demo, I don't have access into that environment because it's still in beta. But what you can do, Kenny and anybody else who's interested in this, we do have a Q4 webinar that is available on our website. And from there, we go over all the new releases, and there's a good chunk of about 20 minutes where we can talk about Talea, and you can actually see a live demo. So with that in mind, if you just go to our websites, or you even look up traffic insights, on your browser, you're able to look at that demo in real time, which will definitely be more granular than anything I can cover during today's webinar. But we do have, an inventory API that's coming out. We also have an alerting API. We have integrations coming down the pipeline with Passportal, BrightGauge, IT Glue, just to name a few, that we're very excited about, that are going to be coming down the pipeline to, again, better blend in with your current tool sets and offerings that you may have.
So I see down in the admin, you've got integrations.
Mm-hmm.
So besides PSA and RMM, what else can you integrate with?
So when it comes to our integrations, I always recommend adding them in at the top level view. That way they traverse across the network in its entirety, right? So that way you're not just having to plug and play on each individual client. So we have integrations with ConnectWise, AutoTask. Like I said, we have the ones upcoming with Passportal, also IT Glue, BrightGauge as well for custom reporting and alerting. We also tie in with Slack, Microsoft Teams, Freshdesk, to name a few. We have an integration with the Continuum ITS portal. So like I said, those are just a couple of the integrations that we leverage today. It's just us, again, kind of being, that third-party vendor that, again, builds into your current tool set and offering. So with that being said, I find that when it comes to the MSP space, there's so many vendors that you can go in and, look at everything when it comes to, what we tie into. But when it comes to the MSP service offering, we want to make sure that we're fitting into that suite as well. So I like to think of the MSP offering as a tool belt. So you have your RMM, you have your screwdrivers and hammers, you have your PSA. Auvik is just, another piece of software that's going to act as a tool within your arsenal to better service your clients. So a lot of our partners think of us as that missing piece of the puzzle when it comes to, the networking aspect of the configuration backups, remote access, being able to automatically map the environment itself, no more having to kind of play around with those manual documentation systems. I can see you just plugged in, some of our integrations that are available. The one area that I always like to kind of point is our knowledge base, which, you linked when it comes to integrations. If you go ahead and click knowledge base when it comes to Auvik, you can actually scroll down here and see all the administrations of Auvik. So we actually have a great knowledge base when it comes to setting up, not only integrations, but even things like device details. So if you wanted to look up a Sonic Wall SNMP enablement or, an ASA startup, we actually have documented articles with photos as well to help you through the process.
Very cool. So I'm curious if anyone else has any other questions, technical questions for Anthony. I feel like, you gave us a deep dive, and because your platform is such a narrowly focused, in a good way, solution, that, it really is easy for you just to show us everything.
Yeah, it's something that it's just easy to kind of sit down and break it down, especially once you have the visual aspect. I mean, people who ask me what Auvik does that are not in a technical role, it's essentially kind of like a GPS system, if you will, of that environment. So now, no longer kind of playing around with that, static map that you may have created. Everything is just easily, at a click of a mouse or a snap of fingers, you can find that device that you're looking to kind of drill down on, or just better understand that client environment. And I noticed there's a question here from Alp Eisen here when it comes to that IT Glue integration. We're actually rounding out the final stages of the beta. So from what we've been told by the product team, we're still fingers crossed to have it ready to go prior to that 2019 start date. What we're waiting on right now is just having that inventory API that I mentioned briefly before be finalized through our proof of concept. And like I said, we're just at that finish line. The main thing that's going to be happening is the documentation of all the device details. So any device that we're discovering in Auvik at this point in time, it will then be pushed over into IT Glue. In terms of map integrations and whatnot, that's something that we're forecasting to kind of be released down the road. The main thing is the device details, which will then be pushed into IT Glue. For our partners who are using Autotask and ConnectWise today, because we're already linking the integration through that platform already, you can actually leverage ConnectWise, Manage, or Autotask as the medium into Glue if you're also using those platforms today.
So basically right now, there's no integration with IT Glue. It's still in beta or entering beta. And when it does go live, if they already are using ConnectWise or Autotask and have one of those or whatever integrated with IT Glue, you're not really going to be adding much additional insights. You're not going to be adding the fun map or the network topology or any of that stuff into IT Glue.
So when it comes to Glue, I'm just talking about the first release, right? So the main thing is we want to be able to get something out to market as fast as possible, right? So same thing goes when it comes to things like traffic insights and whatnot. It's going to be kind of that chunked release as we continue to build out the portal. We want to make sure that we're nailing it right from the first time around, as opposed to putting out something that was just rushed. So this has been something we've really been fine tuning. We've been making sure that we're dotting all of our I's, crossing all of our T's. And eventually, as we continue to roll out this offering, there's going to be more and more features added into the mix. So for everybody who's interested in following the IT Glue integration, following anything that was mentioned along the press releases, you can see here we have 2018 product releases as well in Auvik. And then we also have that Q4 webinar that you can jump in on our website as well, where you can then take a deep dive and get a better understanding for what functionalities are going to be coming out with the new integrations that are set to be rolling out over the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. And Wayne asked, I know that we went over this earlier, Wayne asked how the information is collecting data. Is it an agent or something else?
That's a great question, Wayne. So when it comes to the collectors, I kind of touched upon this near the beginning of the call. The one misconception when it comes to network monitoring, some people will ask me, do I need to have an agent on every single device acting as a probe? And the answer is no. What we use is a single collector. It can be done either through a virtual appliance through VMware, a bare metal bash script installer, or the Windows command prompt as an administrator on a server or designated Windows device. The main criteria that we need with our collector is just an ongoing internet connection. So I prefer servers to deploy on because they're going to be the ones running 24/7. When it comes to deploying on people's workstations, if it gets turned off after 5 o'clock, then obviously the monitoring will then be turned off with it, right? So when it comes to the collectors, you're not billed by the collector when it comes to Auvik. It's strictly on a network device basis. So you can actually see here, we have our office collector, which is actually disconnected right now, and we have our virtual collector kicked in as a backup here.
Excellent. So let's talk about what this costs. I know you said, what you do charge for and what you don't charge for, but what are you charging?
Yeah, so when it comes to our pricing, we try and make it work to fit within your current MSP model, right? So let me just open up my screen share again here when it comes to that presentation here. And so when it comes to our pricing, it's scaled for your growth. So we only bill for routers, managed switches, firewalls, and physical Wi-Fi controllers. Anything that's cloud-based, when it comes to Auvik, and the Wi-Fi controllers are going to be seen as non-billable devices. So if you're using anything like Meraki or Ubiquiti or anything that would be cloud hosted, they would not be billed as a controller. So for the most part, it's just routers, managed switches, and firewalls. For all other devices, like the servers and workstations and everything else, they'll be monitored for free. You can have unlimited users, unlimited managed clients, and unlimited support. There's no annual fee you need to pay us to have ongoing support. It's all a part of you being an Auvik partner.
And to clarify, you said, Ubiquity is a cloud controller. If they have the Ubiquity, I believe they call it the cloud key, that little, little device that you can put into the network, that would be a controller that you can manage. That would be billable.
So it would have to be like a physical standalone device, almost like a Cisco Wi-Fi controller or a Ruckus Wi-Fi controller. I don't believe we bill for the unified platform when it comes to, that controller or their APs, even for that matter. All access points are free across all vendors.
Okay. I would still like to get clarification on that, because the unified cloud key is a physical device that runs the controller software locally on the network.
Okay.
And I just put a link to it so you can see what I'm talking about. Basically what that does is that gives the company their own controller. It's hosted internally. And then they don't have to pay us to manage it, so to speak, because it's theirs, which then we'll charge them to manage it anyway, because, but regardless, there is a hardware controller that you can get from Ubiquity. And I just want to clarify that this may be a billable thing.
Right. So if it's an on-prem physical device, when it comes to that, it would be a billed device. But if it's a cloud key controller and it's cloud-based, it would not be a billable device. So I just want to clarify that.
Sounds good.
So I would say on average, when it comes to a dollar figure for the pricing, we find our partners pay anywhere from $20 US to maybe $50 US per client, just depending on the sheer size. So obviously, if you have a handful of routers and firewalls and switches within that environment, there's going to be more devices to being built. But if you only have, maybe one main firewall or one main router and a managed switch downstream, then you're obviously going to be on the cheaper end of the spectrum.
Okay. And when we're buying Auvik, are we signing up for, a bundle, if you will? Do we have to buy a group of agents, or can we just pay as we go?
So it's a little bit of both. So we do have a tiered pricing approach. Our minimum commitment is 10 devices when it comes to Auvik and pricing. But from then on out, it's totally up to you when you want to upgrade or add in any additional devices. So if you need a subscription of 13 devices, of 23 devices, of 102 devices, it doesn't really matter. We're happy to accommodate. But we do have specific pricing thresholds that you get a discounted price on a per device cost to help you grow and scale. So at our initial pricing, we're looking at anywhere from, around $12.50 to, $15 per device. And then it'll end up going down as you continue to grow. So 40 devices, 100 devices, 250. As you continue to grow, our pricing's fit to accommodate.
Awesome. All right. Now, what about getting signed up, becoming a partner of Auvik?
Yeah. So when it comes to our partnerships, the roadmap that we like to go through is we have an initial demo, kind of like we walked through today, just to go over all the bells and whistles and answer any questions. Again, maybe on that more one-on-one setting, we're more than happy to, for anybody who's, on today's webinar and any of your followers here, Steve, we're more than happy to have another one-on-one with them, better service their needs here, and then go through that demo phase. Or if you want to fast track into a trial, it's 14 days and it is unlimited. And myself and my colleagues, we always like to do, a weekly check-in to make sure that you're getting the most out of that trial subscription. And then from there, if you like what you see and you want to become a partner, then we would obviously make sure that you're set up for success moving forward. And so what comes with an Auvik partnership is not only our services personally as an account manager, where you also get teamed up with a partner success manager. And so their main role here, Steve, in their day-to-day is to make sure that they're servicing, any upgrades or downgrades should you ever need to maybe cut back on your devices or need to advance on the amount of devices. If you're using, Auvik to help prospect, we do find a lot of our partners end up growing in subscription as they continue to be an Auvik partner over time. But they also help hook you up with things like trainings and, other webinars that we host personally, or even something like Auvik certification. So back in Auvik, we launched a certification program that's included, in your Auvik onboarding to be an Auvik certified professional, where we will give you some quizzes, help you take some tests, and then if you pass a certain grading, I think it's 80% or something like that, we'll send you out a nice little certificate. You'll get a little LinkedIn badge, and then that's something that we're going to be building out over time. Now, that's actually a really nice segue here for our offering here when it comes to our pricing and whatnot, was because typically that one-time fee for that Auvik partnership is around $500. But for all of the MSP webinars members, if you go into the vendors page after today's webinar, this $500 fee is going to be 100% waived for you, kind of as a thank you, and also as a value added, because you're obviously a great and loyal listener to this MSP webinar that happens on a regular basis.
Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah. So we've heard nothing but good things. And the one thing that I also just wanted to kind of plug in, and it actually worked out great for timing when it comes to this webinar today. Just last week, our marketing team finished up this awesome document when it comes to how to prospect, pitch, and sell these managed service offerings by introducing Auvik. But they didn't stop there with just the how-to step-by-step guide. They also created some sample emails and sample phone scripts for the sales and marketing team at the MSPs that are partners of ours to leverage. There's also a how-to guide to perform a network assessment. And this is all going to be released free to anybody who wants to email us at roi@auvik.com. This will automatically be sent out your way to help better your chances of either winning that new client with Auvik or just helping perform network assessments and get more and more clients to buy into the managed service offering.
That's awesome, man. Well, Anthony, I got to say, I'm impressed. You have a great tool here. I just want to clarify for those of you watching, I'm just going to kind of wrap this up and put a bow on it. If you are using ConnectWise Automate, maybe Kaseya VSA, but definitely ConnectWise Automate, you can do a lot of the stuff, not all, that we've seen on Auvik. It would take a lot of setup, but it can be done. If you're using one of the other RMM tools, chances are you're missing out on a lot of the metrics that this tool is able to bring in. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, if your clients, Spectrum, what a great segue. If your clients are using like Spectrum or, something like that, and they're just using the cable modem as their internal router and Wi-Fi, this isn't going to be a good fit because that's being managed by Spectrum. You have no insight on the device. So, you got to have the right type of clients in order to be able to use a tool like Auvik and to really be able to get the ROI that you're expecting out of a tool like Auvik. So as long as you're aware of that, and you don't have some crazy expectations. Here's the other thing, I would sign up for stuff like this, and I would get it all installed and implemented, and then I'd sit there and I'd look at the dashboard. And I would immediately be like, why do I have this? It's not doing anything. Well, it is doing something. It's just not detecting anything wrong right now. So, make sure you have reasonable expectations in your mind of, you're going to install this and you're not going to immediately start seeing alerts. Okay. I mean, maybe you will, maybe your client networks are that messed up, but this isn't some like magical thing that's going to start doing all this stuff. It'll start backing up your firewalls, routers, and switches and that kind of stuff, but it's only going to tell you when something's wrong. So I just want to make sure that the expectation is clear. Like when you're going into this, it's not like you're buying a new car. Okay. And if Brian is in here still, no, I don't think Brian made it. Poor Brian bought a Tesla and it's been on its way for 3 weeks now. And when he gets that Tesla, it's going to be great. He's going to sit in it. It's got the big screen with all the fancy things to push. And so there's a big difference between buying a new toy and buying a network monitoring tool. Okay, I just want to set the expectation. That's all, guys. So
I like how you compare us to being the Tesla of the RMM space. That was a nice touch.
Yeah, I try to make everyone happy.
No, that's
Anthony,
awesome. But Steve, you hit the nail on the head there. That's awesome. Thanks for doing that.
Absolutely. Anthony, I really appreciate you doing this. Thanks to you and to Auvik. For those of you that are members of MSP Webinars, hop over to the member portal. You will see Auvik right there on the top of the vendors deals section. If you're not a member, get signed up. Just go to mspwebinars.com and there is a link there at the top, Why Join Us, and that'll show you how to get started. Thanks so much for joining us. I will see you all at the next webinar. You all have yourselves a great day.